Guest today, we've got Rhythm, and I'm Peter, and we're going to talk today about making stop motion videos. And Rhythm is our expert, and she's a member of the PYCC Youth Center. And I'm going to show one of her videos that she's made, and then we're going to talk about how we made it, and then we're going to talk about tips for how you can make your own at home. So this is from her YouTube channel, which you should definitely subscribe to, Bumble Beetle Space AG. So definitely check that out. I'm going to click subscribe right now. There we go. I'm subscribed. And we're going to check out her video. Then we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, that's my YouTube intro. I made that. And then Rowan is like, it's loud, but Rowan is like the one that doesn't make sense.
That looks so good. So it goes on to say all the things you can expect from the video, which is good. It's a smart thing to have.
Well, that's my channel, not the video. But
I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say is your channel.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a lot of great things on your channel. And that video is just like a little surprise. It looks like your green screen fell down. Do you want to fix that real fast?
Oh, no, I took it down.
Oh, you took it down. It was pretty awesome, but I understand if it limits your space. Okay, so after having seen that amazing stop motion, I'm sure that took you like a million years to put together because I know stop motion takes a lot of patience.
I filmed all that in like 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay, so what you're telling our audience right now is that they too could make a stop motion in 20 minutes or less. Is that what you're telling our audiences?
I don't know. It depends on like how many frames you have.
Oh, good. Okay, let's start talking there.
How much
So how many?
you move your object.
Okay, so how many frames do you need, and how do you decide that?
I don't know. So I just import it into iMovie and I put the preferences to 1 frames per second because I have I take a bunch of pictures and then I import them.
Okay, so you can do that in iMovie, and you go to iMovie preferences, and let me I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna open up iMovie here.
I have my laptop right here, and I
you have your laptop.
finished importing a bunch of pictures because I had a bunch of pictures, but I didn't finish importing them, so that's over there.
All right, well that's a great place to start. So I'm going to go ahead and open up iMovie, and we're just gonna take a look at what iMovie looks like. Okay, so here's iMovie, and there's nothing here. It's totally empty. And so if I go to the iMovie menu at the top of the screen and I choose preferences.
Yeah, and you can, and then you put all of the information in.
Okay, so for the first information, the first option you have, it says photo placement, and the default option is Ken Burns. So what Ken Burns will do is like zoom and crop.
It moves the crop around the screen.
And you probably don't want that because that won't really work for stop motion, right?
You don't want that.
All right, so should we say fit or should we say crop to fill? I think we should say fit.
I usually do crop to fill, but you can do whatever.
All right, so we'll set that to crop to fill. And for photo duration, 4 seconds is way too long. That's the default. So we should make it like 1 second, you're saying, or should we make it even shorter?
0.1 seconds is what I have.
Okay, so 0.1 seconds, and that'll be our photo duration. And cool, so our preference has been updated. And now if I were to, I don't even know if I have pictures on this computer. I don't even know how to find them. How do I even find pictures in iMovie?
Well, how I do it is I have my computer right here, and I have iMovie, and I make it smaller, and I have all the photos. Oh, these are all my dolls as my computer background, but I have all the photos. I have a folder for stop motion, and I have all the photos that I want to import in one folder, and I drag that folder. So I have a bunch of different folders in this one folder, and I drag that folder with all the pictures into iMovie.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So you have all of your pictures organized into a folder on your computer, and this is before you've even started editing in iMovie. So you open up iMovie, you make a new project, and then you set those preferences in iMovie, and then after all those preferences are set, then you take that folder where all your pictures are and you drag it into iMovie. Do you drag it right onto the to the project timeline?
You drag it onto the thing that says My Movie and then the number. So you'll have your photos and you drag it, and there should be like a little green plus sign, and then you let go and it imports them.
That is super helpful. Okay, so you'll see that little green plus sign. What else should we watch for? Or does it take a minute, or what do we expect after doing that?
Then they'll just start to load in the import media thing, and then you're gonna, if you want to select all of the photos, and you press Command A and you hold that, and it'll select all of them, and you can drag that into the timeline.
Okay, so you hold Command and press A to select all, and then you drag those onto your timeline. And they go into like the right order, right? Because their names should be, because all their names should be like something like IMG number, something like that. And then hopefully it'll just drop them all in order. So I want to ask you a couple questions about what do you do even before that, okay? So I know it's really important when you're making a stop motion movie or when you're making any kind of movie, you gotta have kind of a plan, right? So tell me how you design your production. What do you think about before you do it?
Well, I just think about like the basic idea, and then I think of a whole idea in my head. I'm really creative, but I don't like script it or anything. I wing it.
Well, that's a lot of fun, though. I mean,
do have like an idea, and then I write the idea down, like the general idea, so I don't lose it. And then I take the pictures, and I have to cast all of them, like choose which characters I want to be in it. So I do that, and then I start to take the pictures. Like I find a place to start it, and I usually have a bunch of different places, but sometimes it's only one place, like that one video that we were watching. I made that up in my loft, which is my doll room.
But they could be a lot more complicated. You could have different locations.
Yeah, I have different locations in a lot of my videos, a lot of my stop motions that I didn't post because I never finished editing them. They're like old ones.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe you'll finish those, but maybe they were just tools to help you learn. And that's an important thing to point out, too, is that sometimes you'll make something and it doesn't really go anywhere, but you learn something just by trying to make it.
Yeah.
So I think that for our audiences, if we want to teach people how to make a stop motion in the rhythm style, in your style, so whether or not there's a story and a script is not really important. What you have to do is you have to cast your characters, right? So you have to decide which characters are going to be in your show or which objects, right? So you have to have all your materials and characters kind of ready. And then you have to find a location to shoot. And what makes a good location?
Good lighting and like a good background. You don't want to have like a cardboard background that's like has a wall. It's like it should be pleasing for people to look at.
All right. And what are there any risks to doing it outside? Do you prefer to do it inside, and why?
I do prefer to do it inside, but the outside risk, not really risk, but some things that can be annoying is like the lighting is changing, and if you're filming like underneath a tree, there's shadows. And if you use dolls, they fall.
Yeah.
They fall down.
And the wind can probably affect it too.
Yeah.
But that's a good point about the lighting, okay? That's a really important topic. When you're making a stop motion video, you probably want each image to have the same lighting as the previous images, right? So it matches, otherwise it'll look all crazy. And there's two things about lighting. First of all, there's like the brightness and where your lighting's coming from. And then there's also what we call the temperature of light. So sunlight has a certain temperature and like...
Yeah, like it can be like it can be tinted like orange, or it can be tinted like blue.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, you don't want to have different colored lighting.
So when you have like an advanced camera, have you ever heard of the concept of white balance? Do you know what white balance is?
No.
So white balance is how you tell your camera what is the temperature of light. So if it's a shady or a cloudy day, you would have a white balance setting that would be like shade or clouds. If you have like sunlight, you could set it for that. If you have like an indoor lamp, like lighting, because you know how it can look kind of orange sometimes, to a camera. So you would set that adjustment as the white balance setting on your camera. So sometimes before you make a stop motion film, you want to make sure you're not using an auto white balance, because that your lighting might be changing, right? You want to set your white balance manually if you can. There you go, you're back. So lighting is super important, but when you're outdoors, you run the risk of having a changing lighting environment, right? So you're talking about if clouds go over the sun, or I mean, the sun can be really bright too, so it can make like really harsh shadows and stuff. So doing it indoor helps you to control your lighting. So what do you do for your lighting indoors? How do you make it like good enough?
I have a doll room where I film a lot of my stop motions, and it has like different settings. It's like a house, but it's only one room. And it's in my loft, and there's a huge window. And I usually cover that window with like cover parts of it with like a white thing, so it's kind of see-through, but it doesn't so the shadows from oh my gosh, I'm not finishing my sentences. So basically,
I can help you talk
I have
about it.
big windows, and there's a tree like outside the window, so I cover the window, like the part where I have my setting where I want it to be, and I cover that part with like a white thing, so the shadows from the tree don't affect the lighting that much.
That's really smart. And so what you're doing, I'll break it down for our audience, is that you've got great light coming from your window, but the light has too much shadows from the trees, and maybe if the sun's shining in, it can be kind of harsh. So you hang a sheet up there or some kind of a cloth to diffuse the lighting so that the lighting is softer. And then when you're using softer lighting, the shadows aren't as harsh, and you're not as susceptible to like when it changes. And there's your sheet right there that you hang. So when you guys, a pillowcase is genius. So when you guys want to make a stop motion film using lighting from a window, it's good to cover the window with something that will help to soften that light. So we call that diffusion. And it's the same reason why like a photographer might put an umbrella in front of like the flash, if you've ever seen that, or like a big softbox.
Yeah.
It's to diffuse the light and spread it out a little bit so it's a little softer. So Rhythm, you're a genius. You're shaping the light. That's amazing. And
professional lighting, so I use the sun and a sheet or a pillowcase.
And where did you learn about that, or did you just come up with it?
Well, I don't know, I was just doing it one day, so I think I knew it was kind of the same as the umbrella thing, but it wasn't.
It's really similar. And you know, a lot of people who study photography, they learn that like the most important primary source of light is the sun. You know, that's like the first light of all, you know, anything on planet Earth. So if you can find ways to use the sunlight, but to change it, to make it softer, it's great. So you've got your scene set up, you've got your lighting set up. Now, how do you start your project?
So you're gonna position your items or whatever you want to where you want it. So I have Caroline here. Wait. My computer's moving. Okay, so you'll position it however you want it, and you'll have your camera set up, and you'll move the item a little bit. Well, usually it would be sturdier because I'm just holding it all up right now. But I have my camera on a tripod usually, and I take the picture, and then I move it a little bit, and I take the picture. The smaller movements you make, the smoother it looks once it's all put together. But so basically you just move it a little bit, take a picture, and then move it a little bit. And
why do you use a tripod? I heard you mention that.
So the shots isn't like moving around all the time, because if they're moving around all the time, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on, and it doesn't look good. Or like at least find something sturdy to put your camera on. Like
so you want like a tripod, but I think a tripod would be the best, because then you can actually change the angle of the camera, right? And it stays really steady. You know, you don't want to bump that tripod, I guess. So we've got our camera, we've got our tripod. Oh, that's a really nice looking tripod.
Yeah, it was my dad's, but he lets me use it since he doesn't really use it anymore.
That's excellent that you have that. So a tripod is super important. Good lighting is super important. And I guess you need a camera, right? But people can do it using an app too. Have you ever tried a stop motion app?
I used to make my my stop motions on an app called Stop Motion Studio. I just had my iPad, and then sometimes I did it on my phone, and I just set it up. Since I didn't have a tripod that fit my iPad or my phone, I just set it up on a bunch of boxes, and I was taking all the pictures, and it looked fine.
Oh, that's amazing. So let's say that you wanted to shoot a project that had more than one scene. Okay. How would you how would you plan that? You'd have to kind of like have all your materials ready, and like, what would you do to break down a scene and to set up a new scene? Tell me about, like, let's imagine a scene real quick. Let's say we wanted to go ahead.
You finished filming a scene. So what I do is when I finish filming the scene, I look around where I want to be where I want my next scene to be, and I just start placing everything I want there, and I move my camera and my character there. I don't even do a transition or anything, but I just set up a new scene in a new area.
And I guess so when you're choosing your scene, you have to think about whether you want like the whole character in the shot or maybe just their head. Maybe it could like show a little dialogue,
or their body, or their feet.
Right, because maybe you want to show different aspects of them. So it's just like when you're making a movie and you are planning, you don't have to have a script and story. You can kind of improv it, but you have to kind of understand that having a variety of shots and angles that you're planning for is probably going to be more effective for telling your story, whatever your story might be. So it sounds to me like a stop motion film is first of all made up of a bunch of images. And then those images are organized into like, do we call them like sequences? Is that a good way? And then the sequences put together could make like a whole scene. And then those scenes together can make a whole movie, right? So you kind of have to break it down piece by piece. And in order to do it, you want to have a good location with good lighting, and you want to have your tripod and your tools. Now, how about focusing your camera? How do you focus your camera? Maybe the character is like not in the scene yet or something, and how do you focus?
So you focus it. You go to, usually on most cameras, there's a button where you take the picture, and you just like lightly press it until there's like, it starts to focus. Like mine unfocuses first, and then it focuses. And
that makes sense.
That's how I focus. But I can't zoom in too good with this camera. I can't zoom in to a certain point with it focusing good, but as I said, I'm gonna get a new camera, and I'm really excited.
That'll be great. So one suggestion I would have is once you get that new camera, if you have like a camera where the lens and body, are separate, then you can switch the lens over to manual focus, and you just set your focus one time for that shot, and then you can kind of keep the same focus for every image you take for that sequence, right? Did you ever think about setting focus like that?
No.
It could be a good idea. Well, because what I'm
really had a fancy camera before.
Well, we'll go over that briefly. So if you have your lens on your camera and you go to take the picture, pushing the shutter button will make the camera try to focus. Is that right? Is that what your camera does?
Yeah. Well, not pushing it, but like lightly pressing on it.
Lightly pressing it. Yeah, they call it like pushing it halfway. So if you have a scene with no characters and just a white background, the camera might be focusing on the background and not the characters. So maybe you'd want to like kind of put your characters where they're going to be, and then you adjust the focus on your camera manually using the focus ring, and then you can start to create the images for your shot. So that might be a way that when you get your new camera that you can do that to make it look more professional. So keeping your focus consistent for each shot, and also making sure your white balance isn't going all over the place. Because usually if you have a white background, it makes it really easy to set your white balance. But maybe once the doll gets in there, the doll might be wearing like a bright blue dress, and suddenly your white balance changes because it thinks it's like a blue scene, So you might want to make sure your white balance is not set to auto either. So that's another thing. Now, do you use any kind of manual settings, or does your camera seem to make pretty good decisions about how to adjust the brightness of your shot?
Well, it has flash, and there's a bunch of buttons on it, and I don't know what they all mean, but there's this one that looks like a flower, which most cameras have, And I think that's for when you're doing it outside. I don't really know.
The flower
But
button sometimes means like when you're taking a picture of something close up, for example, like a flower.
oh yeah. Oh okay, yeah. But there's Flash, and sometimes I use Flash.
Do you use Flash? So why would you use Flash sometimes?
Because like I made a stop motion when it was like the sun was setting and it was getting dark and the lighting wasn't that good, so I used Flash to get a whiter lighting so the lighting wasn't all orange.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Do you ever use
It
like?
didn't look like bad. Like when I normally use Flash, it looks bad, but it didn't look bad that time because it was like the orange light and the flash light, the light from the flash, so it like combined to make a white light that doesn't look bad.
Oh, that sounds really cool. That sounds like a really good way to do that. I would be scared to use Flash because I would be afraid that it wouldn't be like the same in each picture unless you had like your Flash set up and it was like totally on like a manual mode where you could control how much power it had each time. But I imagine that if you were like a Hollywood filmmaker, you could probably, you have really good lighting equipment and you could have people to do that. But when you're on your own, you just kind of have to do the best with what you have. What else do you use to light your scene? Do you ever use like a lamp or anything like that, or mostly just the natural light that's available in the room?
Yeah, mostly just the natural light because we don't have any plugs up there. Well,
Oh yeah.
I think we do because my dad uses a lot, but it's on my dad's side because we have a split loft. Like one side is his and one side is mine. But on my side, there's not any. So I usually use natural light, so I can't like plug in a lamp.
So you just got to do the best of what you got.
Yeah.
Now tell me about your characters and stories. Tell me about the ideas you have. How do you do that?
Like I said, I'll just be doing something and an idea pops into my head. And then I think of names for the characters and then I write down the idea briefly and then I start casting everyone and then I start filming.
So you do write down the idea. So you do a little bit of planning.
Yeah, but like I do like so I don't like lose the idea because I usually end up starting to film like an hour after I get the idea, and by that time, if I don't write it down, I forget it.
So like, what kind of ideas have you had? Give me an example of one. Or give me an example of an idea that you have for something you haven't made yet.
Well, there was this old stop motion I made, and it was about a girl that moved into a new town, and then she met this other girl when she was walking, and the other girl's dog hit her, so they fell down, and then they became friends, and I never finished it.
That sounds like a great start, though. It could be a whole series. And maybe like, you know how like there's the Marvel comics and like the Avengers, and that's the whole Marvel comic universe. You could have like the Rhythm stop motion universe with all of your characters. And eventually there's like some major plot that develops and some huge epic story.
Like,
and
so I have the characters that they play, and then I have them. Like they all have their own personalities, but when they're in the stop motions, except for like their own vlogs ones and everything, when it's like serious stop motions or stuff like that, they're playing different characters. So like I treat them like people, so they're being actresses.
Really? Do they do like have their own makeup and hair?
Well, I do their hair, but I can't put makeup on them because it could like stain them.
It would not be good. That's probably true. But you do make their own outfits. Tell me about that outfit you made again.
Well, I don't make all of their outfits, but I made a little overall dress this morning. It's pink.
That is really great. Really great. Well, that's a whole new dimension. So you've got that talent now too. So aside from developing your characters and creating your movies, now you can make their own costumes, and that'll help your audiences to identify that they're different characters. You know, maybe they could be like twins or sisters or totally different movies. And then your audience.
I have two sets of twins.
Do you really?
I have 10 dolls in total. And
wow.
I have two sets of twins. One of the sets of twins are Kanani and Nea. They're both Hawaiian dolls, and they both arrived on the same day, so that's why I decided to make them twins. And my second set of twins I got one of them on Christmas and the second one for my birthday. But my neighbor, they were actually her old dolls, so I decided to make them twins too, since they came from the same person. And Julie and Delilah are their names.
Oh, that's great. So, what other advice do you have for our other stop motion filmmakers out there? I know a lot of people are interested in doing stop motion, especially because, a lot of people are kind of stuck at home. So, how would you give advice to those people? What would you tell them?
Do it your own way, because the way I do it isn't very good.
I think it's awesome. So what do we have to look forward to on your channel coming out soon?
Well, I actually recently just got Caroline like 4 days ago on Tuesday. I got her on Tuesday, and I'm editing together all the clips of me opening her.
Oh,
So
wonderful. So an unboxing?
Yeah. And I fixed her up too, because I got her used, so she wasn't like new. So I fixed her up.
Got her cleaned up and ready for the big screen?
Yeah. Her neck strings were actually cut, so I had to replace them.
Oh my gosh, so you actually
my
redid
hands
that.
hurt a lot, so my dad had to help me with the last part because my hands hurt.
I bet it was hard to do. What is your inspiration? What are some of your favorite movies, or what movies have you seen lately that you thought were good, or what do you like?
Well, I just recently watched Titanic for the first time. I was planning on doing a Titanic stop motion, but then I realized that movie's like 3 hours long, so I would have to make the stop motion like an hour long, and so I quit. I didn't do that, but I do get inspired by a lot of AG-tubers. Like Mixie Pixie 7 is one of my biggest inspirations.
Okay.
She got me into stop motion.
Oh, good. We should link that maybe in the video description. So you'll have to send me that information. You could recreate Titanic. You just maybe wouldn't do the whole movie. Maybe just the most important scenes. But
the most important scene is the whole movie.
I understand it's a really good movie, but maybe like a scene where, Jack's getting on the boat, and isn't he like a stowaway or something, or how does he get on the boat?
He won the tickets in not the lottery. He was poker. Yeah, poker, I think.
So we could have him like winning the tickets, and then the next scene is Jack getting on the boat, and then Jack could see Rose, and then they get, romantic for each other, and then the boat sinks, and then I don't want to spoil it, but the ending now. So yeah. Maybe those are like the main scenes to focus on. I bet you could do a really great version that was like maybe under 2 minutes.
I had everybody casted already, but then I even made costumes. Like I made the Heart of the Ocean. I have the Heart of the Ocean that I made.
I can't wait to see that.
Like a bead on a piece of elastic, and I called it the Heart of the Ocean.
That's perfect. See, that's perfect. So you already have this idea. Who did you cast as Jack in your movie?
Jack, I casted Molly. I dressed her up like a boy, and I put her hair up in a hat, so she looked like Jack. And she's the only one with bangs, so she's the only one I could make look like a decent boy.
Oh, that's perfectly great. Yeah, you can cast your dolls as any characters in Titanic. What other characters would you need to finish telling the story?
Well, I just had the basic ones, Jack, Rose, Cal, and then I could switch up their costumes to make them look like other people. And I have a whole that was when I only had 9. Like I said, I recently got Caroline, so I had 6. Yeah, I had 6 other dolls that I could dress up to make other people. Like the main people were Cal, Rose, and Jack.
Now, when you're doing a stop motion, you need to add sound effects too, right?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, I just add the sound effects on iMovie after I import them.
Could you record sound effects though? Like if you needed walking sounds, you could record walking sounds?
No, it comes with a bunch of preset sounds, and they don't have the right sound you want, you can go to the YouTube audio library and you can get like free music that's not copyrighted. And then there's a tab that says music and then sound effects, and you can go to the sound effects on that, and it has a lot of sound effects.
Brilliant. Okay, so you'd build your movie. So when you're editing it in iMovie, you'll add those sound effects, and you can also add music too.
The YouTube thing downloads it to iTunes, and then you get it from iTunes onto iMovie.
Well, that sounds great. That sounds like a lot of fun and a really great process. And I'm going to go ahead and we're going to end this video, Rhythm, but we're going to stick around, okay? So don't go anywhere. But thank you a lot for all your tutorials and tips, and we can't wait to check out more of your channel and everything from you soon. And we wish you all the best of success. And thank you.